Good evening, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Frigid, cold day and evening and week, right? Quite cold over here. Not too horrible, though. No, not too horrible. All right, dear friends, chapter 37. This is big, big, big stuff. Got to tell you. Why? First of all, chapter 37 is, if I'm not mistaken, the biggest chapter in Tanya, meaning, word count. It's the longest chapter. So we're going to be sitting on this chapter for quite a while, and as you can see, I prepared a lot to read today. I don't think we're going to get through everything I prepared, but at least most of it, because this chapter we have to cover ground, and this chapter brings it all home. The big idea that we've been developing from chapter 35, chapter 36. This is where it really all happens. All right, l'chaim, l'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvarei. Over the past two chapters, we have been teasing out an idea. The author has been working us through an idea. And the idea is that Judaism, as we see, is very, very action-centric. We are all about action. As much as we have spirituality and as much as there's meditation, that's a big part of our religion, at the end of the day, Judaism is a religion of action. Do this, do that. Do this at this time with this item, etc. That's really all of Yiddishkeit, right? Shabbos comes, take a candle, light it at this time on this date, light a candle, and then make kiddush. Make kiddush, take a cup of wine and lift it up and say these words and drink it. We're very into doing stuff, and the Alter Rebbe introduced us to the big, big, big idea, which is going to come alive in this chapter. But last chapter we have been introduced to the idea that the reason why Judaism is that way. And in fact, the reason why there is something called Judaism, and the reason why there is something called the Jew or the Jewish people, the only reason why you and I, why are we even here? Why is the whole world here? There's a purpose. There's a purpose. God did it for a reason. What's that reason? God simply wanted to have a home here on earth. God wanted to make a place which is so spiritually in the dumps, so spiritually low, and then to have that place become his home. And we are living in that space. It's not just a physical space, it's a spiritual space. We live in the space where God is simply, completely unapparent in our reality. That is the very end of the process of God creating realities and worlds. What we have here is our world where everything exists in our world besides God, which is crazy. Isn't that crazy? It's very interesting. Everything is a part of reality besides God. God made a reality where everything else is real besides him. That's the world we live in. That's what makes the world that we live in such a spiritually low place, such an ungodly place, and that we should make a home for God. We learned in the last chapter that God gave us a little glimpse of what that's going to look like. When God gave us the Torah on Mount Sinai, he gave us a flash of what the world looks like when you could peel away that obstruction, when you could pierce the illusion. And if you would actually see how this is God's world and how everything within this world is simply God, is godly energy, what would happen then? What would it look like? And it was so overwhelming for all of us, for the Jewish people, that the Jews immediately passed out. And that was that. God gave them two glimpses. Both times the Jews immediately dropped dead. The souls couldn't be contained in bodies, which is what we learned in the last chapter. And that was that. God gave us a glimpse. But what's the next step? What next? The goal is that we should somehow recreate that experience that the Jews experienced for a fraction of a second at Sinai. That the whole sense of separation between God and the world, that all melts away. It's an illusion. It's a fraud. It's a lie. This world is not something other than God. It's not that there's two realities. There's only one reality. God is the truth of our reality. God's the truth of our world. How do we make that purpose happen? So, dear friends, today is where we're going to learn how it happens. And this chapter is going to be, it's a beautiful chapter. And there's a real system. This chapter is the how. How do we make it happen? How does it happen? How does this dream that God has, how does that happen? Let's start reading. In the last chapter, right, chapter 37, titled How the Purpose Happens, Part 1, The Elevation of the Physical. Here we go. In the last chapter, we described the ultimate perfection of the Messianic era and the resurrection of the dead, when the infinite light will shine openly in this physical world. That's the goal. The goal is that God's infinite light, the truth of God, should shine within our physical world. Says the Alter Rebbe, for this to happen, how do we make it happen? It all depends on our actions and hard work throughout the duration of our exile. Dear friends, the keys are in our hands. What makes this dream happen? Not by God doing something. It's by us making it happen. We have the tools to make this happen. And this chapter is here to show us what those tools are. Continues the Alter Rebbe. You see, a mitzvah causes its own reward. This is a very, very important paragraph. So I want to read it with you carefully. You see, a mitzvah causes its own reward. Every time you do a mitzvah, you allow the infinite light to shine from above to below. You integrate that light within. We have 3 sentences here. We need to unpack these 3 sentences. Number 1, says the Alter Rebbe, a mitzvah causes its own reward. Let's unpack that. You know, the word reward is a bad word, because a reward is usually something which is given transactionally. Meaning like this. If I hire somebody to, I don't know, if I go to a mechanic and I say, okay, I need new brake pads, right? Okay. Go give me an oil change. So he does work for me for a few minutes, for an hour. Okay. And then what does he do? He gives me a bill and I pay him money. What is the relationship between changing brake pads and money? Is there any relationship between changing brake pads and money? No, there's no relationship, which means changing brake pads doesn't make money. But the mechanic needs money, and he offers a service, and I give him as a reward for his service, I give him something. But it's not that there's any relationship between changing brake pads and generating money, right? This does not equal that. Says the Alter Rebbe, some people think that when we talk in Judaism about a concept called the Messianic era, the coming of Mashiach, that, okay, that's God's reward. God makes us very busy. God gives us a lot of hard work to do. Do this mitzvah, do that mitzvah, do another mitzvah. And then, okay, if you do it enough and you do it for enough time, I'll give you a good time sometime in the future. The Alter Rebbe says, no, that's not Mashiach. It's not a reward. Or if you want to use the word reward, the reward is the mitzvah itself. It's not that if you do this, God will trade it and give you something in return. It's that you doing this creates this itself. I'll give you another example. If I tell my kids, you know what, your bedrooms are a mess, which they are. All right, your bedrooms are a mess. Listen, here's the deal. Go to your bedroom, spend a half hour cleaning up the entire room, take the vacuum cleaner, I want to get the whole bedroom clean. And if you do that, I'll drive you to 7-Eleven and I'll get you guys a Slurpee. There's no real inherent relationship between making your room clean and Slurpees. There's no relationship. But then there's something more profound, which usually is more of an adult thing, right? An adult will say, you know what, my bedroom is a little bit messy. I'm going to spend a half hour and clean up my bedroom. And what's the reward for cleaning your bedroom? It's a clean bedroom. You know what the reward is? It's the thing itself. What you did is the reward. It's like a cliche, but sometimes people say that, like, you know, they felt so good after doing a good deed that they don't even want anything more, right? Just the opportunity to do that good deed or to give tzedakah, that felt so good. I felt so, it was so meaningful to give tzedakah today. I don't even need any reward. That was the reward. The experience itself is the reward. So the Alter Rebbe says, when you do a mitzvah, it's not that God says, okay, if you do this for me, I'll do that for you. Tit for tat. Quid pro quo. Quid pro quo, right? It's not if you do this, I'll do that for you. The mitzvah itself does this. How does that happen? Says the Alter Rebbe like this. The world that we live in is a world that everything within our world, which is a big theme we've been developing throughout Tanya, everything within our world conceals God. I have a box of tissues over here, all right? This box of tissues is harmless, okay? This box of tissues is a good thing, but this box of tissues conceals God. Its very existence is a concealment on God. Nature itself, everything of it, a blade of grass conceals God. It asserts itself and it obscures the truth of God. There's only one thing that could exist within this world. There's only one thing that could break the illusion of godlessness that our world possesses. There's only one thing in this world that could break the illusion that God is not here. There's only one thing that could bring the truth of God into our world, and that is a mitzvah. A mitzvah, says the Alter Rebbe, allows the infinite light to shine. We bring it down from above to below. Everything within this world hides God, but when there's a mitzvah in this world, that mitzvah brings a beacon of God into this world. And says the Alter Rebbe, you integrate that light within the physical world. Mitzvahs are designed to engage the physical world. That's the point. The whole point of a mitzvah is that it touches the physical world. It's like that we could take the highest thing that could ever exist, the truth of God, and give it a place, a conduit, a place where it could exist within our world. This is the big idea. The big idea of this chapter is going to be to show us how when we do a mitzvah, we are taking the truth of God and allowing it to enter within our world. That's the effect that a mitzvah has. What does that? A mitzvah. I'll tell you a cute little story. It's maybe not so cute. It's a very profound story. In late 1991, the Rebbe the Rebbe shared with his secretaries that the Rebbe was already 90 years old, almost 90 years old, and the Rebbe said that he feels that he's suffering from eyesight loss. And the way the Rebbe described it is that when he tries reading the fine print at the edges of the Talmud, it's becoming difficult for him. How does the Rebbe know when his vision starts to go bad? Because he can't read the fine print in the Talmud. Okay, so they brought the Rebbe to a top eye specialist in New York. So you know the way it works. They have to dilate the eyes, and so they do whatever they have to do, whatever treatments. But after they dilated the Rebbe's eyes, the Rebbe had to stay for a half hour until the dilation will go down, right? So the doctor, who was a Jewish doctor, used the opportunity to speak with the Rebbe. And he wasn't a religious man, and he asked the Rebbe this question. He says, I've traveled the world a lot. I've seen so much of what the Chabad Shluchim do. They do such good work. How could it be that after all the work that I witnessed, Mashiach is still not here? So the Rebbe said, I have the exact same question. And that is why I keep on pushing my Chassidim to do a little bit more, keep on working harder. Hopefully we'll get to that little tipping point. And the doctor shared that the Rebbe said in English, he says, I don't let my Chassidim sleep. That's what the Rebbe said. But this is the mitzvah itself makes it happen. The mitzvah itself makes it happen. Oh, we're okay, Leah?
Oh, sorry.
No worries. Okay. What the author is going to do right now is he's going to take us into a little bit of a tour of what happens when we do a mitzvah. And let's break down the ingredients of what do we do mitzvahs with, and how does this work? That when we do a mitzvah, we allow God's infinite light to shine into this world, and that we take something from the physical world and we integrate them. We're able to bring and actually give a home. Something within this world can now host God's light. And I want to introduce you to a little bit of a concept over here. It's a drop deep. It's a big concept that comes up all throughout Tanya, but here's the time to really focus on it again. Within our universe, from a Jewish perspective, from a Jewish legal perspective, from a Torah perspective, we could divide all of reality and the experience of life into three categories. There's the holy, there's the permitted, and there's the prohibited. There's the holy, the permitted, the prohibited. The holy, what you could do and what you're not allowed to do. Holy means that we were able to take something of our universe, of our world, and we were able to somehow make it into a very special thing. For example, a Torah scroll. A Torah scroll, the raw materials of a Torah scroll are not holy by themselves. This is parchment and ink and wood. There's nothing holy about these. But when you make it in a certain way, that's called holy. Then there's something called mundane, the permitted. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing either necessarily good about it, which means it's just neutral. For example, this box of tissues. Is this box of tissues holy? No. Is it prohibited? No. It's mundane. It's permitted. If you want a tissue, gesundheit, use a tissue. You don't want a tissue, don't use it. And then there's the prohibited, the stuff you're not allowed to. Let's talk about the two categories, the permitted and the prohibited. What the Torah says, you could do this, or what the Torah says, you're not allowed to do that. Why would the Torah deny us certain pleasures of life? Why would the Torah say, you're allowed to eat meat, but only from a cow, not from a pig? Why? What's the issue with the pig? And the answer is like this. The Alter introduced us to the spiritual truth behind this concept of Jewish law. This you're allowed to do, this you're not allowed to do. Why is there that break? Everything within this world is made up of klipa. Right? You remember that word? That's a big word we've been talking about all the time, right? Is there even one chapter of Tanya that doesn't speak about klipa? What's klipa? Klipa is the spiritual ingredient that is present within everything that hides the truth of God. So this phone is klipa. You want to know why? You want to know how I know? Because I look at a phone and I see a phone and I don't see God. The word klipa literally means a shell. And what does a shell do? The shell obstructs what's underneath. So just like if you go to the store and you buy a banana, you can't bite into the banana. It's disgusting. You don't want to eat the peel. You don't want to eat the shell. The shell is obstructing what's inside. If you open up the peel, then you got the good stuff. So when you look at a phone, you're looking at a shell. And I don't mean the physical shell. I mean, it's built in a way, God made reality in a way that there's something called klipa, which is a layer that conceals the godliness of everything. What we have to do is peel off that shell. If we could peel off the shell, we have allowed the godliness within this thing to emerge, and we've broken past the obstruction, the concealment of God. But here's the way it works. There are two types of klipa. So everything in this world is klipa. Everything in this world is klipa. Even something as harmless as this tissue box, it's klipa. And the reason why it's klipa is because you look at a tissue box, you see tissue box, you don't see God, right? But there's two types of klipa. There's one type of klipa, which in Hebrew we call it klipat noga. Klipat noga means it's a little bit transparent. That's literally what the word noga means. It's a shell, but it's a shell that is somewhat more benign. We could work with this shell. We could get past this shell. Then there's a deeper form of klipa. The deeper form of klipa is what's called in the Kabbalah language the three impure klipot. And the three impure klipot have a shell that is too strong for us. We humans don't have the ability to break past the shell of these entities that are created with a harsher, stronger dosage of klipa. Everything that's permitted to us in the Torah, you know why it's permitted to us? Because it's made out of klipa, out of klipat noga. If it's klipat noga, then we as a Jew have the ability to pierce that shell and reveal the godliness within that shell. But if it's made from something prohibited, that means it's something which has the klipa of the three impure klipot. And that means we have no way to access the godliness within that given object. All right, that's a bit of an introduction. Okay, that was a bit much, huh? With that, let's read. Now let's get back to the chapter. It says the author like this: bringing God into physical objects. You see this? Bottom of page 37. Sorry, bottom of the opening page of chapter 37. Bringing God into physical objects. Says the Alter Rebbe. When you do a mitzvah, you take something that was initially under the dominion of Klipat Noga and something that was receiving its vitality from there, and you change its status. That's what you when you do a mitzvah, this is what you're doing. You're taking something that is not holy. You're taking something which is just part of nature. Something which is Klipat Noga. Something that is the energy of Klipat Noga, under the dominion of Klipat Noga, and something which gets its energy from Klipat Noga, and you change it, you transform it. How does that work? Says the Alter Rebbe, that could be any of the kosher, permissible objects through which an action mitzvah is done. Oh, here we have two ingredients. Number one, to do a mitzvah, you need a physical object. Number two, we need that physical object to be kosher, to be permissible, to be klipat noga. If it's klipat noga, then we as a Jew could go and somehow tamper with it and break past the klipa. For example, says the Alter Rebbe, the parchment of the tefillin, parchment that you make tefillin out of a mezuzah or of a Torah scroll. You know, it's a fascinating thing. Did you ever see anybody ever take a dead cow and bury the cow? You ever saw that? It's a pretty jarring image, no? Can you imagine make a funeral for a cow? Of course not. What do you mean? A cow dies. A cow dies. I don't know. What happens to it? Nature happens to it. But says the Alter, but 1 second. If it's a cow is kosher. A cow is permissible. Which means even though cow is not holy, totally not holy, right? We don't care about what I'm saying. But we could take a cow and we could use a cow for a mitzvah. And when we take a cow and use it for mitzvah, we're doing this effect. We're bringing godliness and we are converting the klipa to holy energy. It becomes holy. If a pair of tefillin gets old and falls out of usage, you don't put it in the garbage. Where do you put it? You bury it. You have to treat it with a lot of care. A Torah scroll that got burnt, God forbid, or damaged, and you bury it. It's holy. Treat it with the respect. Just shows over here what's going on over here. We could transform something from a physical world and do a mitzvah with it. Continues the Alter Rebbe, top of page 275. Since the mitzvah can only have its effect when dealing with klipat noga, the object of the mitzvah must be initially kosher. As the sages taught, only that which is kosher and permissible for you to eat can be used for the craft of heaven. Oh, you want to do the craft of heaven? It needs to be kosher and permissible to eat. And then you are able to work with it. This is the key. It needs to be something which is permissible. If you take a pig and you use its hide to write a mezuzah, it's nothing. It's not a mitzvah. There's no holiness there. Because you can't break the heaviness of the klipa of something which is prohibited, because it's from the 3 impure klipot. So we need to make sure that it's something which is permissible. That's the big ingredient over here. Another example, says the Alter Rebbe, similarly, an etrog, to be used for the mitzvah, the citron that we use on Sukkot, cannot be forbidden due to the prohibition of arla. You can't use an etrog that's not kosher. When would an etrog not be kosher? It's very interesting. There's a law in the Torah called arla. Arla is a mitzvah that the first 3 years of a tree, you're not allowed to eat from its fruit. Do you ever hear about that mitzvah? The first 3 years of a tree, you're not allowed to eat from its fruit. Now, why not? I don't know. But the way God made this world is that the first 3 years of a tree, the fruit that it bears is of a harsher klipa, and therefore it's prohibited for a Jew to eat. After 3 years, the fruit become kosher, in the sense that now it's klipat noga. It has a lesser level of klipa, and a Jew could engage with it. So you want to do the mitzvah with an etrog. It has to be a kosher etrog. It can't be arla. Why? Explains the Alter Rebbe in the note, marginal note. Says the Alter Rebbe, since arla is from the 3 impure klipot that can never be elevated, as stated in Eitz Chaim. Here you have it, right? Because arla, the first 3 years of the tree's fruits, they have a harsher level of klipa. And they cannot be elevated. We as Jews don't have the ability through our engagement with the 3 impure klipa to elevate them. And the same is true with any mitzvah brought about through a sin, God forbid. The same is true about any mitzvah. For example, if you buy kosher meat, you go to the Grove, you go to One Stop, you buy kosher meat, and you cook up a storm, you make good meat for a Friday night Shabbos dinner. And you sit down and you make kiddush and you enjoy your Shabbos dinner and you eat meat. Literally, the meat becomes holy. Okay? It's a wild idea. A cow is not holy. But if you take a cow's meat, literally right now, we transform the nature of that physical object. But let's say you get non-kosher food. You say, let me make a Shabbos dinner, but I'm not going to serve kosher. There's a big problem over here. That we're trying to do a mitzvah, but the mitzvah can't take hold in the physical stuff we're using. If it's not kosher, there's an inability over here. The holiness can't break through the klipa. So it has to be something which is permitted. And so too, says the Alter Rebbe, money to be given as charity cannot be stolen money. And the same goes for all such similar items. So too money. Charity. When you give charity, you're doing a mitzvah with money. But you got to make sure it's kosher money. It can't be stolen money, or else it's not going to have the effect. So ingredient number 1 is we need to have something from the physical world. Ingredient number 2, it has to be something which is permissible, something which is kosher, because then it's from klipat noga. Oh, if we have those 2 ingredients here, that we have something physical, and it's of klipat noga, says the Alter Rebbe, then you use one of these items to fulfill a mitzvah, which is the will of God. What then happens? The energy, listen to these words, critical words over here. The energy of that physical object is elevated. The klipa within it dissolves, and it merges within the infinite light, which is his will that is invested within any of these items. Now that you did a mitzvah with that object, there is no longer anything negating God's presence there, nothing to obstruct his light. We don't witness this with our physical eyes and our physical senses because our senses don't process this. But if you take a pen and you do a mitzvah with this pen, something major just happened. And it really sucks that we don't get to witness it. But literally, this pen until now was being powered by an energy that was hiding God. But because I did a mitzvah with this pen, literally the energy within this pen has transformed to become holy energy. And right now, God is shining in this world through this pen. We don't get to see it. We will see it when Mashiach comes. But when Mashiach comes, it's not that God's going to make it happen when Mashiach comes. No. When Mashiach comes, we will realize that it was always there. We will realize what we did when we did a mitzvah. Maimonides writes this. Maimonides says that the Olam Haba, the world to come, is not a world that God is going to create for us in the afterlife. It's already here now. We're making it now. We're only going to be able to realize it in the future. But right now you do a mitzvah, you are doing something very, very, very transformative within our world. But again, we don't get to see it. We'll be able to see it when Mashiach comes. But again, when Mashiach comes, it won't be like, oh, it just happened. We will realize this was always here. This is what we were doing all these years. And by the way, it shouldn't surprise us that there are things in this world that are very real, but we're not sensing it. We all know the human eye, our sense of vision, has a spectrum. There are certain colors that are beyond our ability to, with our own physical eyes, to take in those colors. We know animals. There are animals that have a better sense of vision. Not only do they see better, they see more colors. There are certain sound waves, certain sound frequencies that are outside of the range of the human ear. Literally, there could be noise and you don't hear it. Why? Because it's either too high or too low beyond your frequency. So there is such an idea of something happening and something existing, but it's beyond your ability to sense it. And that's what happens. When you do a mitzvah, something very, very real is happening. We don't get to sense it, but it's very real. And it's happening now. This is the first idea. When you do a mitzvah with a physical object, you are bringing into that physical object godliness, and you transform, you break through the klipa, and now we have something physical within this world that is holding onto the truth of God. This is the beginning of God having a home within this world. Every time you do a mitzvah, you're taking another physical thing and using it for the mitzvah, giving God something to hold on to in this world, and God is slowly, slowly having a home within this world. Okay, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We still have a lot more to develop. But it goes even further, says the Alter. But now let's do the next level. Page 276. The same way within the world, on a large level, on a macro level, there are things that are holy. There's the spiritual and there's the physical. So too within ourselves. We have a spiritual side, we have a physical side. We have a godly soul and an animal soul, a divine soul and an animal soul. The divine soul is spiritual and godly, and the animal soul is the miniature version of the klipa within ourselves. But one second. Just like in order to do a mitzvah, you need to take something from the physical world. Go get a cow. Go get an etrog. Go get some money, right? So too, we're taking some of our own inner animal soul. How do you do a mitzvah? If you want to light a Shabbos candles, you have to get out of your seat, go get a Shabbos candle, put it in the candlestick. You're doing stuff. You want to put on tefillin, you're doing stuff. You stand up, open up the bag, put it on your arm, wrap it, you're doing stuff. The moment you're doing something, you are engaging your animal soul. You are using up energy from your animal soul. The Alter says the same thing happens with your animal soul. The energy you invest in the mitzvah becomes holy energy. It used to be klipa energy. Our animal souls are of klipat noga. But when you do a mitzvah with that energy, the same effect happens. You're following what's going on over here? So this is the second hit. Let's read. Page 276. Bringing God into your animal soul. Says the Alter Rebbe, that takes care of the object with which you do the mitzvah. But the same effect happens with the energy of the biological animal soul running through the limbs of the person who's doing this mitzvah. There's energy powering this mitzvah, and that energy comes from the animal soul. What happens to that energy? That energy is also invested in the act of the mitzvah. So it also rises from the klipa. It too merges with the holiness of the mitzvah, meaning with God's will, and is therefore absorbed within the infinite light. The same thing is happening. Every mitzvah has multiple hits. Number one, there's something in this world, something here, something physical. We're using it for a mitzvah. Literally, the physical thing itself changes and becomes something now that's a conduit for God's presence within this world. And the same thing happens within ourselves. A piece of our soul, the piece of our animal soul that's not holy, whatever we invest in the mitzvah is transformed to become holy. And this idea that we could engage the animal soul and convert a little bit of our animal soul to become holy by doing a mitzvah takes us to the next genre of mitzvahs. You see, many mitzvahs involve physical objects. Get yourself something physical. Many mitzvahs are telling you to go get something. Some mitzvahs are not somethings. Some mitzvahs happen a little bit more deeper, more internally. What are those mitzvahs by any chance? What would you say? What are some mitzvahs that happen? They're not about engaging the world necessarily, but they happen on a little bit of a more personal, on a little bit of a deeper level. They're not activity mitzvahs.
Lighting Shabbos candles.
No, but lighting Shabbos candles, you're doing something.
Oh, so you're not to do anything?
What's something where you're not really doing something? You're not engaging the physical world.
Prayer.
Prayer, very good. Prayer, it's not about finding stuff to do stuff with, right? Rarely, sometimes we pray with a lulav, with a shofar. Okay, that's rarely. Generally speaking, a day-to-day prayer is speaking. Or it's even more meditative, right? What's another example? Very good, David. Along those lines, what's another example? Another key mitzvah? What do you say? Anybody? Torah study. Is Torah study about engaging the physical reality? No. The way you study is actually by not being very active. You sit in one place and you use your head. You want to understand. What about those mitzvahs? Are those mitzvahs also about making God a home within the physical world? And the Alter says yes. If you think about it and you'll look into the mitzvah, you'll see the mitzvah is designed to be something that brings God into the physical. We're not into spiritual mitzvahs per se. The spirituality is a different level. The point of the mitzvahs is to engage the physical world, even those mitzvahs which are not so physical. Let's read. Says the Alter Rebbe. What about mitzvahs of speech, such as studying Torah, saying the Shema Yisrael, and praying, etc.? These are not essentially true physical actions under the dominion of Klipa Noga. Right? We're not really engaging the physical world over here. But says the Alter Rebbe, look carefully at these mitzvahs, and you'll see that there's a critical component of these mitzvahs. This is a fascinating idea. Says the Alter Rebbe, nevertheless, the halachic consensus is that you don't fulfill the mitzvah by simply thinking the words in your mind. Meditation does not count as recitation, quote unquote. You have to actually pronounce the words with your lips. There's something very peculiar about the mitzvah of studying and the mitzvah of praying, which is that the Torah wants you to get those words out of your mouth, which doesn't, on a basic level, doesn't make so much sense. God wants you to pray. What's prayer? It's meditative, connect with God, use your heart. Okay, so I don't need to say anything for that. I want to just meditate. Right? Saying words shouldn't be a very important part of a meditative process. Says the Torah, no. Say words. That's what prayer is all about. Meditation, that's step number 2. The Alter says over here, you did not fulfill the mitzvah to daven if you only meditated. You have to say words. And conversely, if you said words and you didn't meditate, you still have the mitzvah. That's a pretty heavy idea, no? All you need, say words. Same thing with Torah study. We say it in the Shema. We say vidibarta bam, right? What does that mean, vidibarta bam? And you shall speak these words. Torah study is primarily all about speech. Say words of Torah. Think about them as well. But say them. That's what Torah study is. Which is why it's actually very, very interesting. If you go to a library, it's quiet, right? Shashtil. A real library, no one's taught you. You go to a university library. Even if you sneeze, you're disturbing everybody, right? Everybody's quiet. Everybody's reading their books. No one's moving their lips. What are you, crazy? You're reading books with your lips? How do Jews study Torah? We speak it. We say it with gusto. Let's say it. Right? It's a Jewish value. It's very unique. Jews study and pray verbally. It's all about saying words. Why? Here's the clue. Here's the key. It says the Alter Rebbe, and halacha maintains, Jewish law maintains that, quote, moving the lips constitutes a concrete action. You move your lips, you're doing something. If you think, you're not doing anything. But if you move lips, that is a minimum level of action. And a mitzvah is all about action. So even Torah study, what's the point? Move your body. Even lips. It's not a lot of movement. It's something. Why is that so important? Explains the Alter Rebbe. For the divine soul is incapable of articulating the physical lips, mouth, tongue, and teeth. This is something only the biological animal soul can do, since it is invested within the actual limbs of the body. The point of a mitzvah is that it doesn't stay spiritual. The point of a mitzvah is that it engages the real world. We want to bring the animal soul into doing a mitzvah. If you pray or if you study Torah and all you did was think, you engaged your godly soul, but you left your animal soul behind. No. The goal is to make a home for God in this world. Not up there, but here. So when we do a mitzvah, we want it to be something which engages the body and engages the animal soul. What gets the animal soul going? If we have to do something biological. Moving lips is a very big biological function. Thinking, not so much. But speaking is a biological function. I once saw online a video of an MRI scan of somebody speaking. You ever saw this before? You can look it up online. A video of what's happening, MRI scan of somebody speaking. It is wild. This whole area of the body is moving 100 miles per hour. When you speak, we don't even realize it. There are multiple moving parts moving unbelievably quickly. Lips, your tongue is flying all over the place. Your throat is contracting, it's squeezing and expanding very rapidly. There's a whole part of the body that's firing away when you speak. It's a very big biological function. And the Talmud tells us, yes, speaking is an action. And speaking engages the animal soul, because you got to do something. The divine soul doesn't know how to move body parts. It's like too detached. The soul that gives us biological life and biological functionality is the animal soul. That's what we want to do. Don't think words of Torah. Speak them. Make them happen in real life. Engage the physical part of you. Engage your animal soul. And what do you do when you say words of Torah? You're taking energy from your animal soul, which is klipa, and you're converting it into holy energy. In other words, you're bringing God down into this world by speaking. But you got to do something that engages the physical body. That's the key. Says the Alter Rebbe, so the more energy that you put into speaking, the more you are investing the powers of the biological animal soul into those words. As the verse goes, all my bones will say, God who is like you. Says the Alter Rebbe, so here we go. When you daven, when you pray, or when you study, the goal is to invest as much of the body, as much of our biological life into the mitzvah. Which is why it's a Jewish value that when we daven or when we study, we get very animated. Only Jews know how to study with their whole bodies. It's crazy. We're a little bit crazy, no? In a university library, they read sitting in one place, and you flip pages of a book. How does a Jew study? First of all, you're screaming. If you're not screaming, you're not learning properly. Say it, debate it, discuss it. And you're animated. Also, your hands are part of the learning. Your whole body is moving. Right? Are we Jews a little bit crazy that when we learn, like, we start chuckling, we're going up and down? What's going on over there? It's a Jewish value. All my bones will say, get your whole body going in this mitzvah. The more we invest in the mitzvah, the more energy we are burning, and the more energy we are converting from klipa energy to into holy energy. And we are literally taking something very physical and very klipa, our own animal soul, and we're making it holy. We're bringing God into that space. That's the Jewish value. I'll tell you a cute little story before we continue on. There was a professor, he passed away a good few years ago. His name was Professor Yaakov Hanoka. Dr. Lieb, who was at the Shabbat in the Heights, we met his son, right? Rabbi Hanoka from Pasadena. He was our MC at the program of Shabbat in the Heights. So his father was a world-class inventor and scientist, physicist. He has dozens of patents under his name, and he helped. He created many patents that are used today in solar panels. All right? He was a big guy. He was like an absent-minded professor in his high teens. He was a secular Jewish kid, bumped into Chabad, and he became religious. He became a Chabad guy. And he started learning in yeshiva. Yaakov Hanoka. Okay, listen to the story. One day he needed to buy a new suit, so he went to the store and bought a new suit. Now Yaakov Hanoka was such a brilliant guy, and he was so absent-minded, like an absent-minded professor, his suit didn't begin to fit him. Okay, those people, they walk into the store, they take the suit, they don't even try it on, they just walk out with it. That's what he did. He didn't care about how he looked. He was such a real intellectual in that way. The next day, this is like in the early 60s. The next day, the Rebbe walks out of 770, and Yaakov Hanoka is standing there with his new suit. And the Rebbe stops mid-track and asks him, did something happen with your suit? So he says, I bought myself a new suit. This is what his son told me. He said, the Rebbe looked at him and said like this: Hasidism is not asceticism. And the Rebbe walked off. Let me repeat that. Hasidism is not asceticism. Asceticism, from the word like an ascetic in English, means somebody who detaches from the physical world. You ever heard of that word before? Like in Buddhism, right? Their monks are ascetics. They have removed themselves from the physical world. An ascetic is somebody who practices self-denial and abstinence from worldly pleasures for spiritual reasons. Hasidism is not asceticism. What we're seeing over here is that the author is telling us, you know what a mitzvah is all about? It's not about asceticism. We want to get all in. Let's get this as physical as possible. That's the point. That's the goal. Let's read one more paragraph, and then we're going to wrap up for tonight. This concept is in another Talmudic passage, which is a very fascinating passage. Top of page 277. Says the Alter Rebbe, that's what our sages meant when they said, if it's laid out in all of your 248 limbs, it's safe. If not, it could be forgotten. Okay, let me explain to you that quote. This is a quote in the Talmud, which actually was said by a woman. Her name was Bruria, the wife of Rabbi Meir, the great sage Rabbi Meir. I think Rabbi Meir. Bruria is somebody who's quoted a lot in the Talmud. And even though she was a woman, she's considered a sage. Right? She was a sage. She was a brilliant woman, and her opinion mattered a lot. And the Talmud quotes this statement from her. She once saw one of her husband's students studying Torah, but like in a whisper. He was studying Torah like the way they study in Cambridge University, all right, in Oxford. Doing it quietly. So she told him, why are you studying so silently? He said, I don't know, this is the way I study quietly. So she said these words: if it's laid out, if the Torah is laid out in all your 248 limbs, it's safe. If not, it could be forgotten. Now, what does that mean, that the Torah is laid out in all your 248 limbs? What that literally means is the Torah is not meant to be a quiet, passive experience. When you study Torah, as much as possible, we should be investing our entire body, 248 limbs. Break a sweat, I don't know. Somehow, the Jews have perfected the art of studying with your whole body. That's the idea, 248 limbs. And if not, it could be forgotten. Why is that? The author explains. This is an idea from Kabbalah. Forgetfulness. Where does forgetfulness come from? Why do we study Torah and forget it? Did you ever forget Torah? Isn't it a pretty sad thing? You go to a Torah class, 2 days later you have no clue what you learned. What did you learn in the class? I don't know, I got to remember. Where did that come from? How did you forget it? This is where it comes from. Forgetfulness, you see, arises due to the klipa of the body and the biological animal soul. This is very interesting. When you study Torah, there's a much stronger chance you're going to forget Torah study than something else you read. And the answer is because there's resistance. There's resistance from the body and there's resistance from the animal soul. And this resistance causes you to forget it. It is like an influence within you to make you forget it. But if, when you study the Torah, you brought the animal soul into the study, you use your entire body and your entire animal soul to study the Torah, then what happens? Says the Alter Rebbe, but since those are both of Klipat Noga, they could merge with holiness. When is that? When you exhaust them, putting all their power into the holiness of Torah or prayer. Then, since they're no longer Klipa, nothing is forgotten. Take whatever is klipa while you're learning, and instead of allowing it to remain klipa, invest it into the Torah study. Then you have no klipa at that moment. You won't forget it. This is what Bruria says in the Talmud. So the Alter Rebbe is using this as a support for the concept that we can invest our entire bodies and all our biological energy into the mitzvah of speech. So what we studied so far is 2 hits. Number one, the physical object with which we do the mitzvah. When you take something physical, you do a mitzvah with it. You're bringing God's energy into that physical object. And now this physical object is no more concealing God, but allowing God to shine forth. And the same thing within ourselves. The energy from our animal soul. The more energy we invest into a mitzvah with our animal soul, the more of our animal soul becomes a home for God. Dear friends, we're just beginning to scratch the surface over here. But what we're seeing over here is Judaism is not a religion that is spiritual. We are not into spirituality. We're into spirituality, but that's not the point. And it's not that Judaism is tolerant of physical life. Like in other religions, physicality and physical experience, worldly experiences, are shunned upon. It's not spiritual. You want to be spiritual, don't get married. You want to be spiritual, don't eat. You want to be spiritual, don't have a job. What does Judaism say? No. Not only is Judaism tolerant of the physical, the whole point is the physical. The whole point. It's not that we should do a mitzvah in the spiritual worlds. We should do a mitzvah right here. Let's get stuff going. Give me something from this world. The whole point is the physical. And in this way, this becomes a massive, radical paradigm shift in what religion is all about, what Yiddishkeit is all about. It's not about leaving the physical reality to become more spiritual. It's about bringing down the spiritual into the day-to-day hum of physical life. And I want to tell you 2 stories. 2 stories with the Alter Rebbe. And we'll conclude with these 2 stories. In the late 1700s, very late 1700s, I think it was 1798, the Alter Rebbe was arrested in Tsarist Russia by the Tsarist government on false charges, and the Alter Rebbe was held in a prison cell. Now, the way in Leningrad, the way the prison cell, as you can still see it till today, it was like a fort surrounded by, it was like a little island surrounded by a river. And that was the way that they kept these high-level criminals. There was no chance to escape because you were surrounded by the river. So there was a river, and in the middle, the whole complex was a prison cell, and that's it. And what they would do is, so with the Alter Rebbe, they wanted to interrogate the Alter Rebbe. So they would go and take him out of his prison cell, and they would put him on a little boat, and they would shuttle him to the other side of the river. And on the other side of the river, they had government offices. They would interrogate him there. So the Alter Rebbe multiple times was being taken out of his prison cell to go on a boat and bring him to the interrogation office back and forth. One time, it was nighttime, and the Alter Rebbe, it was the night to do the mitzvah of sanctifying the moon. Which I don't know if you're familiar with this. There's a mitzvah. It's called Kiddush Levana, to sanctify the moon. We look up at the moon and we say a certain blessing, a certain prayer. And that was the appropriate night. There's only a few nights a month that is the right time of the month to bless the moon. And the Alter Rebbe asked the guards of this little boat if they could stop the boats like that he could pray. And they, of course, said no. We don't take orders from prisoners here. We're not stopping a boat. You know, this is not a joyride. You're going back to jail. What happened? All of a sudden, a miracle happened. The boat stopped in its tracks. They couldn't get the boat to move. It was a miracle. The Alter Rebbe did a miracle. The boat stopped mid-river. The Alter Rebbe stood up and said the first paragraph of the prayer. It's like a few pages long, the prayer. The Alter Rebbe only said the opening paragraph and then sat down and the boat continued going. And then the Alter Rebbe repeated his request again. Please stop the boat. I'd like to say the prayer. Okay, now the captain of the boat understood that you don't play around with the Alter Rebbe. So he says, I'll do it, but what could you give me in return? And the Alter Rebbe said, I'll give you a blessing. She said, okay, very good. I accept. He stopped the boat. The Alter Rebbe stood up, finished the entire prayer, and then he gave them permission to keep on going. They finished it. And indeed, the Alter Rebbe's blessing came to fruition. Legend has it that officer climbed the ranks and became a very, very prestigious and wealthy aristocrat in the Tsar's government. Okay. The Rebbe asks a very interesting question. The Rebbe spoke about this story, and the Rebbe says, what is going on over here? If the Alter Rebbe could stop the boat by himself, why did he have to ask them for permission? And then he stops the boat by himself, only says the beginning of the prayer, and then he says, no, I want you guys to stop it. Why? And the answer is because that's what Judaism is all about. Judaism is not about breaking reality. It's about integration. We're not here to break the physical world. We want to work with the physical world. Bring it together. Bring the spiritual into the physical, not to break the physical, not to shun the physical, not to cancel out the physical. One more story. The Alter Rebbe was once given a gift. It was a snuff box. In Yiddish, it's called the Schmecktabak, right? You know what I'm talking about, Joel? Once upon a time, Jews used to do the snuff, right? Schmecktabak. Tobacco which you smell, you put in your nose and you breathe it in. So somebody gifted the Alter Rebbe with a silver Schmecktabak, a snuffing box. And the Alter Rebbe said like this. The Alter Rebbe didn't want to accept the gift. The Alter Rebbe said there's only one part of the body that doesn't have negative bodily and worldly desires that drag the person down, which is the nose. It's very interesting. All other parts of the body could have desires which are unhealthy. But the nose, there's nothing, there's no desires with the nose that schlep a person down. He says, and you want to corrupt my nose too? I'm not taking this gift. But instead of rejecting the gift, this is the way the story went. The way the story was told, the way legend had it, was that the Alter Rebbe took the box, cracked off the cover, and said, I'll use the cover as a mirror. Every single day when I daven, I'll use it to check that my tefillin is put on properly. I'll use it as a mirror for the mitzvah. It's a nice story. He didn't want to use it, just to, give yourself another desire with the nose. He didn't want to use it for tobacco, but he used it for a mirror. This story was shared with the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, who's the great-great-grandson of the Alter Rebbe. And he says there's one critical detail of the story which is wrong. The story went that he cracked the cover off. He said, my great-great-grandfather would never, ever break something. He carefully removed the hinge, the pin of the hinge, and separated it nicely. He didn't break it. Because Chassidus is not about breaking the world. It's about working with the world. Yeah, it's very profound. Chassidus and Judaism, we're not here to break the world. We want to work with the world. Integration. Bring the spiritual into the physical. We're not looking to escape the physical. The whole point is down here. Dear friends, l'chaim, l'chaim. That's what we got for tonight. Part 1. It's going to get even better. Part 1 of chapter 37. Yevgenia, yes, that's what the Pistons say. Do work. We got to just do work. Okay. Few questions here. What if someone worked on Shabbos and donated the money to the shul? That's a very, very good question.
What was the question, Rabbi?
What if someone worked on Shabbos and donated the money to the shul? So he did a mitzvah with money, but the money came through a sin. Okay, it's a good question.
Well,
There's the good effects of a mitzvah, and that could happen. But then are we changing the fabric of that physical reality? That's something else. Sometimes you could do a good mitzvah, but because of something like this, you weren't able to change the energy of the physical object. So that's a good question. Is it different when praying the Amidah? Another question. That's a very good question as well. Amidah is a little bit different, that you're not supposed to say it out loud. But still, the Amidah, you must say it. You only fulfill the mitzvah of saying the Amidah if you're saying the words, and if it's audible to you. It shouldn't be audible to somebody else, but it should be audible to you. And there's also the idea of, by davening, we sway, we shuckle, right? There's a natural swaying that we Jews do. So Amidah is part of that as well. All right.
I thought you weren't supposed to do that in the Mida.
Shuckle?
supposed to-
No,
Yeah.
yeah, of course you could. Yeah, meaning gently. You're not supposed to move. You're not supposed to move your feet. But if you're standing in one place, shuckling is totally appropriate.
Rabbi, if,
Yes.
so when you're studying every day the Chumash, or if you're studying different parts of the Torah, and you're studying and you're by yourself, you should verbalize that so you can hear it? Is that what you're saying?
The best thing is to verbalize it. Don't just read it on your phone, Joel. When you read it out loud with your mouth.
Well, I'm saying it, usually I read it in my head. You know what
Right.
I'm saying?
So
Right.
verbalize it. From now on, start verbalizing it.
You're saying we should verbalize.
Exactly.
The same with the Tehillim, too.
Same with Tehillim, exactly. Don't pray in your mind. Don't pray in your thoughts. Don't study in your thoughts. Get it out of your mouth.
So I have another question. If
Sure.
you don't say the baracha before studying Torah, is that not getting you full benefit? I mean, is there...
Oh, is it not doing the mitzvah? Not necessarily. Meaning, you're supposed to say a blessing on it, but did you not do the mitzvah? I think you still did the mitzvah. Yeah, you still do the mitzvah.
What's the greatest of all mitzvahs?
Studying Torah and giving charity.
I got you.
If you study Tanya, the Alter loves it. The Torah study is equal to all the mitzvahs and charity.
Did you make your goal, Rabbi Levi?
We did not. No, we did not.
I'm sorry.
Which is okay. No, don't worry. That's okay. That's part of making high goals. If it was easy to make, then it wasn't high enough. But we still have a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of money to raise. Yes.
All right.
But I appreciate you asking. There's also some people who still have, who are annual donors who just have still not made a pledge or still haven't given. So it's more than what's up there on the website, but we did not hit the goal.
I'm sorry. Well, hopefully you will.
Exactly. God willing. Don't worry about it. We're not fretting. We just know that we still have a lot of more work to do.
All right. Well, thank you for this amazing lesson tonight. It was kind of mind-blowing, of course, as usual, but this one's really...
Wonderful, wonderful.
All
right.
Well, have a good night, everybody, and a good week.
Good evening, everybody. We'll
Thank
see you
you,
soon.
too.
God bless you all.
Thank
We'll
you.
see y'all
Good
soon.
night.